2024. It is episode 48 and episode 10 of season 3 of the Sports Daily College Basketball Podcast. I'm your host, Sean Vowells, and as usual, I'm joined by Mike Koomar. Mike, we had a pretty stacked weekend of hoops, really sort of dominated by Saturday. There were so many games that I couldn't keep up with posting all the individual games on the Instagram, so I just kind of grouped them into some fours because they were just going final too fast. But as usual, we'll start off with your team of the week, and then we'll go from there.
Thanks, Sean. My team of the week comes from our home state of New Jersey. It's going to be the Seton Hall Pirates. Boy, what a big week they had, potentially getting into the field of 68 as we speak. They had two clutch wins in their conference, both against ranked opponents. First, they went on the road and knocked off the Providence Friars, being only the fifth team in the last 4 years to knock off Providence in Rhode Island. And they followed that up with an even bigger win at home in front of a sellout crowd at the Prudential Center, knocking off Marquette 78-75. Seton Hall just seems like they're playing with a lot more as a unit. It's not just a Kadari Richmond show anymore. This is a really well-ironed machine. They're getting a couple of big-time performances off their bench with Coleman and Hutchinson. So, Sean, Seton Hall all of a sudden looks really, really good.
Yeah, I think it's as simple as they're getting the ball to go in the basket, and that is affecting everything else that they do. They always get after it on the defensive end, but ever since that away win against Missouri, which isn't super impressive, they dropped 93 in there, and they have had one bad performance since. I think we talked about, Mike, that Seton Hall probably needed to get one of these two games, and they end up getting both. And if you look at their next two games, they're both on the road, but against Butler and Georgetown, certainly a couple of the easier road games in the conference. So Seton Hall sitting at 10-5. Just before we went live, Mike, I posted my most recent bracketology. Seton Hall is in it at number 9. I'll throw it up on the screen real quick here. A lot of 9 seeds in that Big East. But things have turned for them really quickly because they looked pretty poor in the San Diego Invitational where they lost to USC and Iowa, two teams that have really fallen off recently. But they have turned things around, and they get 2 huge wins in the conference, and the middle of this Big East looks pretty fluid. We think Marquette and maybe Marquette and UConn will be at the top, and then after that, there's no team that's definitely third or fourth. So, why don't we talk about another team that Seton Hall did beat there, and that's Providence. They do lose at home for the first time, in a while, and they do lose a tough one on the road to Creighton a couple days later.
Yeah.
But Mike, the main headline from there is Bryce Hopkins. He did tear his ACL. He will be out for the rest of the year. How big of a loss is this for the Friars?
Yeah, this is a huge loss for Providence, and this is a team that's going on a skid right now. You just wonder where they're going to get that production from going forward, Sean, and I don't really know the answer to that. This isn't an incredibly deep team either. Really rolling with 7 players deep, maybe 8 depending on the day. So not a deep team. This is a huge loss for Providence.
I do think that, it'll still be hard to beat them in Rhode Island at their place, but for a team that has had issues scoring it at times this year, to take away their best option is pretty killer. And there were some people who thought Bryce Hopkins could be the Big East Player of the Year this year, and unfortunately for him in Providence, that is not going to happen. But Devin Carter is putting it in enough. He's averaging almost 17 points a game. Josh Aduro at 14. But you're going to need some more contributions from the role players because, you're losing probably one of the most important players to any team in the conference. But Mike, one more thing we're going to talk about the Big East here real quick was a game on Saturday between St. John's and Villanova at Finn Pavilion in Pennsylvania. Rick Pitino's guys get the job done on the road. Villanova drops to 10-5. The Johnnies are 11-4. They controlled this game from start to finish, really. The Red Storm have got things going.
Yeah, it really just seemed like for Coach Pitino's team, he needed a couple of games just to get his feet wet and get that team working together. But this was a sellout crowd at Finneran Pavilion, and St. John's dominated, as you said, from start to finish. Sean, this team could be a top 25 team very soon. They look really good right now, 3-1 in the conference. We're going to see what it comes up for them going forward. They've got a home game against St. John's this week, and then they go on the road to Creighton, Seton Hall before going back home against Marquette. 4 games, we're really going to learn what Coach Pitino's squad has in store. But the St. John's team looks like a completely different team that we saw in mid-November this year.
Yeah, when we did the preview, Chuck and I said that St. John's has probably got the best depth of any team in the Power 5.
Yeah.
And that they can, Rick will mix and match some players in the non-conference and see, what kind of sticks. And he seems to have found a formula. Brady Dunlap, a freshman who, is getting 10, 12 minutes a game in the non-conference, has played 28 and 31 minutes in their last 2 wins. And he's pulling a little bit of the other guys lower.
Scoring well, too. Yeah.
But, no other team really has those options. I mean, R.J. Luis is a terrific player from the UMass transfer. He's getting 19 minutes a game. They seem to be getting, send him in there. He can work really hard, and they get him a rest. And Naheem Aline, national champion, 19 minutes a game. I mean, these are dudes that could be starting on top 25 teams. So I don't think this is as good as St. John's is going to look. And yeah. What really is the ceiling for this team?
Yeah, and I just want to remind our listeners right now, this St. John's team was completely nuked when Pitino came in. I think they've only got 1 returning scholarship player. So this is a completely different look team, and it is understandable why it took them a little bit to get into the swing of things. But like you said, Sean, this could be a Sweet 16 team.
And we'll turn this over to Villanova, Mike, 10-5. Extremely mixed bag this year. They have a win over Memphis, who's turned out to be really good, a win over North Carolina, who has proven to be really good, but a couple of head-scratching losses. At this point, is Villanova just headed for like a 7, 8, or 9 seed and a 5th-place finish in the Big East and a bunch of good games and a bunch of bad games?
Yeah, I mean, this is truly a head-scratcher, Sean, and it just seems to be a lack of consistency. You look at this game against St. John's, they only shot 39% from the field, so left a lot to be had out there. Also turned the ball over 11 times, got a couple of key players in foul trouble, but it really is surprising. You just don't seem to know what Villanova team is going to show up to play on Saturday. It's going to be the good one or the bad one. This team has the capability to knock off UConn, and I think they have the opportunity to lose to Georgetown this year. DePaul might be a stretch, but they'll play this week, so we'll see. But with that being said,
they already went to their place and beat them by 45, so not going to hold my breath on that one. But
yeah,
everyone else,
but everybody else, they have the capability to lose to, and I think that's really concerning for Villanova.
Yeah, so Mike, I think that's all we want to talk about from the. Oh, one more thing about Villanova: Justin Moore hasn't played for the last 5 games. He's a big player for them. They did win on the road against Creighton without him, so it's not like that they're, a terrible team. They've shown some things without him, but hopefully he'll be back soon, and they can figure that out because it's a real mixed bag so far. So we're going to move on to the next conference, Mike, and that is going to be the Big 12. A lot of interesting games happen in this conference this weekend, as it was the first go-around. And we're going to go to Lawrence, Kansas first. TCU, the Horned Frogs give Kansas everything they can handle, but the Jayhawks get across the line with the aid of a very, very favorable flagrant 1 call. TCU, they either won or hung with Kansas last year.
They won big last year in Lawrence. They won big in Lawrence.
So this might.
You know what they say about officiating in Lawrence, Kansas is it's about a 10 to 15 point advantage for the home team, and you certainly saw that on Saturday with that controversial flagrant 1 call at the end. But how about TCU? This is a team that really performed. They showed up, and then about the Jayhawks in the last minute. This is a TCU team that I was not high on after the Diamond Head Classic. They looked incredibly mediocre, especially with that double-digit loss in Nevada and not really pulling away from Hawaii. But this might be a completely different team in the conference. We'll see going forward. They've got a lot of big games going forward. They've got Oklahoma and Houston coming up, so it doesn't get easier for them. But incredibly impressive performance by them.
Yeah, they got some players who can score, which has not really been the case over the last couple of years. Emmanuel Miller went shot for shot with Kevin McCullough, and they've got Jameer Nelson Jr. coming off the bench. He's not, he's only averaging 11 points a game, but he was 20 points a game last year at Delaware. Yeah. So I think this team is.
Trevion Tayson had 24 on Saturday.
Yeah, so I think they've got a shot to make the tournament. Obviously, this win would have helped tremendously, but at the end of the day, it is kind of difficult to win an 8-on-5, which is what it was. I mean, they brought Gene Steratore on. He's like, this is a no call, inadvertent, away from the play. TCU is on a break, up 2, probably make it 4 with 30 seconds left. And Kansas, to their credit, they did convert the extra possession that they got. A lot of teams do like to waste opportunities that they get from the referees, but Kansas survives. And Mike, they aren't ranked number 2 in the country, and I think that they're still a really good team, but are they the worst 13-1 team that we've seen?
Ooh, I don't know. I'm still pretty high on the Jayhawks. That was a pretty tough performance, but we've seen this out of Bill Self teams. This is kind of their lull period in early January. By the time this team hits March, I think they're the best team in the country still. I know it doesn't look great for them right now, but they still have those big wins against UConn and at Indiana. So I'm not worried about the Jayhawks right now.
Yeah, I still think they'll win the Big 12, but if you just keep playing with fire in the NCAA tournament, you could get picked off by a couple of these 8 or 9 seeds, which are going to be good teams. But they just, I don't know if they're the worst 13-1 team, but they're just not as impressive as you would think that number 2 overall in 13-1 Kansas would be. But
sure,
Hunter Dickinson 30-11. Bill Self has done a great job of getting him looks, and when you get 30 from someone, you don't need a ton of other points across the 8 other players that you're playing. So
and I would say, Sean, this isn't the only team in the Big 12 that you got question marks over. Baylor narrowly escaped Oklahoma State this weekend. I was breaking a sweat during that game. Oklahoma State, not a very impressive start to the year. And also Texas. I don't know what's going on with them, but they got a double-digit loss at the hands to Texas Tech in Austin. So a lot of weird question marks right now in the Big 12.
Yeah, Baylor obviously pulling out an away win, which is not easy. I don't think there's much concern there, but with Texas, Mike, they do lose at home to Texas Tech. Now Texas Tech is 12-12 or 12-2, but this is a game that Texas should be winning if they do want to finish at the top part of the conference. And they are 11-3, and somehow they are still in the top 25. But Mike, just one of their wins is out of Quad 4, and that is a neutral court win against Louisville. Or not Louisville, sorry. That is not LSU.
Yeah.
They did actually beat Louisville too, but Louisville has fallen off so far that is not a good win anymore. So this is, I would say major alarm bells for Texas so far.
Yeah.
You got 5 players in double digits, but Disu has missed some time. I think you can certainly panic more about Texas because that's a game they should be winning.
Yeah, absolutely. This is panic mode for the Longhorns right now.
Another Big 12 game, Mike, that I think we should talk about is the BYU Cougars. Their first introduction to the conference. They get beat by Cincinnati at home by 11. Cincinnati 12-2. Not much, not a ton of tough games in the non-conference, but I thought expected BYU to kind of take care of business in this one too, but ultimately they have trouble scoring for the first time this year, and they take an L to open Big 12 play.
Yeah, I guess a little bit of a welcome to the show for Brigham Young. They dominated this game early, Shauna. I got to catch the Cougars in the first half. They looked really good against Cincinnati, opened up with a 7-point lead, and then kind of just took a dump in the second half. Cincinnati dominated, outscoring the Cougars by 18 points, and this is kind of a head-scratcher for Brigham Young. They start the conference. This is not supposed to be one of the tougher teams in the conference, and they're at home in front of a sellout crowd at the Marriott Center. So this is not a game that you expect to lose, and I think they're going to have to go back to the drawing board. They just couldn't shoot coming down the stretch, Sean. This is a team that only scored 29 in the second half. They shot under 33%, field goals under 30% from behind the arc, and they had 18 turnovers. So sloppy basketball, and they couldn't get the ball in the hoop. So for that reason, BYU suffers a pretty big loss in their first game in the Big 12.
And this is also Cincinnati's first game in the Big 12, so congratulations to them for picking up a road win against a ranked team. We also had Oklahoma beating Iowa State, Kansas State beating UCF. I mean, we don't have enough time to go through every single game, but
yeah.
The other one, Mike, that we wanted to talk about before we move on is Houston. They are the last unbeaten team in college basketball. They took care of West Virginia, beat them by the score of 89-55.
Yeah,
Houston looks pretty elite so far.
Yeah, I mean, that West Virginia team is pretty bad, Sean. And I don't even think they had Kurt Kriisa in that game. But with that being said, Houston does look really good, and they're going to have a pretty nice start to the conference season. It's going to be tough the next couple of games. They've got a road game at Iowa State and a road game at TCU. I think they're going to learn pretty quick this isn't the American Conference where you got a lot of off nights. Every single night, you got to bring your A game to the Big 12. So we'll see how they respond this year to the competition. But I do think Houston's up for it, and they may have put themselves in a position to be a front runner for the Big 12 title. That signing of LJ Cryer has proven to be huge for the Cougars, bringing him over from Baylor. He's their leading scorer this year with 17 points per game. He's shooting over 40% from behind the arc. He's just an explosive three-point shooter, and that's been huge for the Cougars.
So before we go into the teams that lost to make Houston the final team that's unbeaten, you said their next two games, Mike, at Iowa State, at TCU. Did they get through there with 2 W's?
I think their toughest test is going to be this Tuesday in Ames, Iowa. That Iowa State team has gone well under the radar this year. They dropped a tough game on the road to a good Oklahoma team. It was a tight game, but this is a really good team. So I am actually going to call that they're going to lose to Iowa State this Tuesday, and that'll be their real welcome to the Big 12.
So that was going to be our first game that we picked, Mike. So I'll write ISU down for you.
Yeah, you can pencil me in for that.
I would be shocked if Houston's a great team, but Iowa State and TCU are good enough to beat them, and I would be really surprised if they get through there with a couple W's. But it's not taking anything away from Houston. It's just every single road game, to an extent, the home team's going to believe that they have at least a shot. So, Mike, we're transitioning to a little bit of mid-major ball right now, and the main reason why Houston is the final unbeaten is James Madison took their first loss of the year to Andre Curbelo and the Southern Miss Eagles, I think, is their mascot. James Madison.
Yeah.
Appalachian State is in their conference, so there's a couple of good teams there. We might be seeing a 2-bid league, but this is not the one that I had circled for James Madison to possibly lose. And any thoughts on this one, and how big of a hit does their at-large hopes take?
They're still an at-large team. They've got one loss, and they've got to tread lightly because if they lose a couple more games like this, then they won't be. But this isn't an awful Southern Miss team. They've got a pretty bad record, but like you said, guys like Andre Curbelo have played big-time college basketball. Curbelo spent 2 years at Illinois and 1 year at St. John's, so they've got a lot of good players, and it really just came down to they knocked down their shots. They shot 49% from the field and made excuse me, I got that wrong. But anyway, Southern Miss is playing a phenomenal game of basketball, and James Madison kind of took a dump. So we'll see what the Dukes have in store, but I think they're still a tournament team, even with that winning the conference championship.
I would say that as long as you don't lose to anybody that's not Appalachian State, I think you're probably okay, for now. Their next 4 games are at home. One of those is against App State, but you get 8-7 South Alabama, 4-9 UL Monroe, and 8-8 Marshall. and then obviously App State too. I think you take care of business in 3 of those, and you get to 17,
Yeah.
18, and 1. I think you're definitely looking at not only an at-large, but maybe even a 7 or 6 seed at this point, because their numbers are still pretty good. But yeah, just a little shocking there from James Madison. They're still very old, and
Yeah.
Terrence Edwards is a really good player for them. So I think they're okay, and I still would watch out for them come NCAA tournament. Another, I guess, mid-major that we can call that took an unexpected L, Mike, was the Florida Atlantic Owls, last year's Final Four team. They lose
Yeah.
at Charlotte 70-68. They were down by 15 at halftime. They bring it all the way back. They do take the lead late, but Lukai Patterson for Charlotte sinks them, and Charlotte pick up their first win over a ranked team in almost 15 years.
Yeah, I mean, huge win for Charlotte. And the story really for FAU was that they got behind big so early in this game. Like you said, they brought it close with about 6 minutes to go, but somehow couldn't execute coming down the stretch. And that seems to be a question mark for Florida Atlantic. They've now got 4 losses on the year, Sean. They're not in a super competitive conference, and they haven't played a ton of true road games. So maybe that was part of the reason that they lost. But they're now 24th in the country. They've got a lot of good quality wins this year. But you start to get a little bit concerned because they've played games a little tighter than they should. That East Carolina game, they won by 15. That game was tied at halftime, I believe. And then they lost to Florida Gulf Coast as well in their final conference game. That was actually their first true road game. But certainly some concern for the Eagles right now, I think. The last 3 games, they haven't looked good.
Yeah, it's just Charlotte basically, with the 15-point lead, decided that they were going to either get a shot clock violation or score in the last 2 seconds, and that just really slowed FAU down. They couldn't really get the tempo going, and that doesn't seem like incredibly difficult to do if you're winning the game against FAU. And they got a little desperate, a couple of passes they shouldn't have thrown, and I do think they're okay. That Arizona win does help a lot. They're still probably a top 25 team, and yeah, they're at 24, and they're still definitely the second best team in the American. But you've lost your 2 true road games this year, and neither of those teams are particularly. I think they might be both just be better than 180 in Ken Palm, but
Yeah,
you can't
not
lose. You can't lose a ton of these games, or you're just going to be dragged into that at-large conversation, and that really should not happen. FAU is a really good team. They've got Tulane on the road on Thursday, and Tulane is 10-4. That game might not be as easy as it once appeared, but time to figure it out for FAU, because you have enough talent to go to the Final Four again. But unfortunate L
good. Yeah.
there. Mike, we're going to transition into the SEC here. The other team that was unbeaten until very recently was the Ole Miss Runnin' Rebs, and they got taken down by the Tennessee Volunteers 90-64 at Rocky Top. Tennessee at number 5 in the country, looking pretty good. This game seemed to be over real early on.
Yeah, I mean, this game was never even close. Tennessee took an early lead against the Running Rebels and never relinquished that. They only had a 9-point lead at halftime, but from watching the game, trying to feel like they had a 15-point lead. Like, they were always dominating Ole Miss. Certainly their toughest game, if it wasn't even on the road, and it was on the road for the Rebels. So this could be a good learning experience. I think everybody in the country knows that Ole Miss is probably not as good as the record shows. But with that being said, we'll see what goes coming up for the Ole Miss Rebels. They've got a couple of good home games coming up. They've got Florida and Vanderbilt. Vanderbilt's an easy win. Florida could be a tougher out, but it is a home game, so they've got a couple games to get their feet wet before they go back on the road. The game I'm circling on my calendar to watch and see what we can think of about Ole Miss is when they go back on the road at Auburn later part of this month. They play there January 20th, and what's going to be a primetime game. So looking forward to that. If they can get to that point undefeated, I think they'll be in good shape.
Yeah, this was the first time where they were really punched in the face. And I know they played a couple of road games already. They went on the road to Temple. They went on the road to UCF. They played Memphis at home. So they've been tested, but not like this. And
No.
when your three guards, their three starting guards who have been really great for them this year, 4 for 12, 3 of 10, 4 for 12.
Yeah.
11 for 34 from the field. That's not going to get the job done ever, let alone against a team like Tennessee. So I think they weren't as good as their record, but they're still probably a tournament team, maybe even a borderline top 25 team. Because they got some good players. They got Brandon Murray, unrelated Juju Murray from St. Peter's, but they've got enough good players to at least, finish in the top half to top 4 of the SEC. Another big game in the SEC, Mike. Florida versus Kentucky. The Wildcats get the job done on the road, down 8 at halftime, down for most of the second half, but Kentucky gets the job done down the stretch. A lot to like from Big Blue Nation for this game.
Yeah, this was just a gritty win, Sean. They ended up taking it from Florida at the end. Like you said, Florida pretty much had the lead for most of this game. It swelled up to that 8-point lead at halftime, but UK just an incredible second half, and this kind of seems like a Kentucky team of old. We have not seen a really competitive John Calipari team last year. We saw them the year before when they got ousted by St. Peter's in the first round, but other than that, Sean, we haven't seen a great Kentucky team in a while, and this just seems to be like one, and they're building it Coach Cal's way. They're doing it with young talent, and it seems like he's saying, I'm not going to care about what's going on with the transfer portal. I'm going to stick to Coach Calipari basketball, which is young talent and one and done. So that's what he's been really good at, and that's what he's got on this team.
Yeah, I think, the majority of these players, Mike, are freshmen, but 2 of the contributors are old veterans. Trey Mitchell and Antonio Reeves both have come in from the transfer portal. I know Reeves has been around for a couple of years, but they seem to be the glue that holds this thing together because, you don't have a great game from Rob Dillingham. He's 2 for 7. Reed Shepard is only 2 for 4. Yeah. He ends up getting to 14 with some free throws late, but there's a bunch of ways that this team can win. You're getting Bradshaw more involved. He was injured early on, and he had a big 3 for them. And at 7-1, his ability to do that, he's starting to get more minutes. I think we're going to see his name shoot up the NBA draft boards because he is definitely one of the best prospects in this. And you have Wagner, you have Reeves, you have Edwards, you have 5 good guards and 4 good forwards. Like, do any other teams have that many good players? I don't think so.
Yeah, this might be the best step in college basketball, Sean. Kentucky, this is a really, really good team.
So one more game in the SEC, Mike, before we move on, and that was probably the most surprising result of the entire weekend, and that was Auburn taking down Arkansas at Bud Walton Arena 83-51. Auburn is 12-2 on the year. They just got into the top 25. They moved up to 16, but analytically they are either top 10 or top 5. They are crushing everybody that they play, other than their 2 losses. And they go into one of the toughest environments in college hoops, and they beat them by 30+. What an impressive performance from Auburn. And at this point, it's probably a 3-horse race in this conference between Auburn, Tennessee, and Kentucky.
It is. And I would say it's not that Auburn beat Arkansas, it's how they beat them. Dominated by 25 points in the second half. This is a team that is known for finishing games, and Auburn crushed them. And you look at Auburn's losses, one of those is the first game of the season, and to a good Baylor team.
They hung in that game.
That was came down to the last minute in that game. Auburn looks really good right now, and you look at how dominant they were on the road. This game kind of spiraled for Arkansas. It definitely got out of control. But with that being said, this is an explosive team. They shot nearly 50% from the field, and they out-rebounded Arkansas by 16. So this is a team that can get it done down low and getting a lot of good low-percentage shots. Really big for them. They scored 83 points. They only had 7 threes made. So it wasn't that they were making the long ball. It's just that they were getting a lot of points in the paint. So this is a really, really impressive Auburn team.
At this point, we'll turn this over to Arkansas, Mike, 9-5 on the year. A consolidation of talent for Coach Muss, but very disappointing so far. And at this point, very, very likely that they do not end up in the NCAA tournament. And with the players that they have, super, super disappointing for the Hogs so far.
Yeah, this is really not a good year for Arkansas. Obviously, Coach Muss's job is secure, but when you've got a sellout crowd against a ranked team, you expect to perform. You expect to at least make this a close game, and they got completely destroyed in this one. So a lot of question marks, and they shot the ball terribly in this game. They only shot 31% from the field, but still no excuse. They just couldn't do anything right. They couldn't even make free throws. 8 for 15 from shooting a charity strike. So. Really, really bad performance. You want to chalk this up as, just a one-off game, but you can when it's this late in the year. That is a really, really bad look for this Arkansas team.
Yeah, there's enough bad teams in the SEC for them to win enough games, and they have Kentucky, and they have Tennessee at home, and they don't go to Rocky Top. They do go to Rupp, but there is still a way that they can turn this thing around, and they have the players to do it,
Sure.
but not likely. Doesn't look like that's likely so far. Let's hope for them that this is rock bottom and they can turn things around. They got 2 road games against Georgia and Florida coming up. I think really important that they get at least one of those, because after that you get some home games against good teams, and then Ole Miss and Kentucky and then Missouri on the road. So that's a tough stretch there, but you'd think that hopefully things can turn around for them in a couple of these road games against Georgia and Florida, teams that they should be at least right there with at the end of the game.
Yeah.
But Mike, we just passed the half-hour mark, so we do have time for some Big Ten today. Obviously, Joe, Mead, and I get very much into that in the In a Nutshell podcast, but I know you wanted to go over one pretty unexpected result from Sunday, and that was Northwestern taking care of Michigan State just a couple days after they get kind of assaulted by Illinois, 30-point loss. They come and turn around and beat up the Spartans. 11-3 Northwestern so far. Where do you stand on them? And then you can go to Michigan State.
Yeah, assaulted is almost a nice word to say. They got absolutely destroyed by Illinois. This game was never even close, and this was a 30-point game with 10 minutes left, and then Illinois kind of maintained. But this is a Northwestern team that was completely trending in the wrong direction. You looked at after they got that win against Purdue, which is probably their signature win on the year, they lost to a quad 4 Chicago State. They got a narrow 10-point win over against a really bad DePaul team. And then they lost, they didn't lose again until that Illinois game. But they've looked pretty bad. However, they made a huge recovery against a trending Michigan State team that had won 5 straight. Barry and Bowie looked really good. I think Bowie had a double-double in that game, 19 and 10.
His first career double-double.
Yeah, and what a good time to do it for Northwestern team that has looked pretty bad in the last several weeks. On the other hand, Michigan State's been looking really good. They're coming off of a 31-point victory over Penn State and included a lot of wins and a nice little win streak that they had. Talked about that big win against Baylor. They took care of Indiana State, who's a pretty good mid-major team. So question marks now for Michigan State after this tough loss in this one. It's not going to get much easier. They've got a road game against Illinois this week before the schedule gets a little easier for them. So both teams, they were trending in opposite directions, but Northwestern's the one that got the win, and Michigan State back to the drawing board.
Yeah, the ball just went in for Northwestern in this game. 55% from the field, and you're able to kind of handle a good Big Ten team without Boo Buie going crazy, which has kind of been their formula over the years, was to kind of let him cook and get 30, and then you win.
Yeah.
Ty Berry, all 5 starters in double digits. They made 9 threes. This was a really good game from Northwestern. So I think. Yeah. If you're Michigan State, you might be able to say it was just one of those days, but Tyson Walker still had 27, and you still shot 40.
Michigan State still shot the.
Yeah.
They still shot the ball well. They were 48% from the field, and they were 47% from 3-point range. So this wasn't a bad offensive performance. The other thing Northwestern did not do is have a lot of mistakes. They only turned the ball over 5 times in this game, and that was a big difference for them in stopping Michigan State.
Yeah, I think Michigan State, was clearly second best today, but it might be a little alarming that isn't like that bad of a performance for them. They're going to lose a
No,
lot of road
yeah,
games if they don't get more out of Malik Hall and from the 5 spot. Malik Hall, Mike, had the 0-0-0-0-0 game. No rebounds, no
yep.
assists, no steals, no points, no blocks. He did have a couple turnovers and personal fouls, but in 25 minutes, that is just really bad.
That's bad. Yeah, as a starter for this Michigan State
you
team.
can find your way into a rebound where the ball just comes to you, but not for Malik Hall. So they did get Jackson Kohler back. He played 3 minutes. He missed 1 shot. Hopefully they could work him in more because they need him to do something at the 5. But we'll go on here to another Big Ten storyline. It was Friday night, Mike, at Mackey Arena. Purdue holds off Illinois. So 83-78. Purdue was in control for most of this game. Illinois kind of pulled it close late. But any thoughts on this one? And Purdue able to get the job done without a whole bunch of points from Zach Edey.
Yeah, Zach Edey even got into foul trouble in this game. If this game lasted another 5 minutes, Illinois may have been able to come out on top. But with that being said, Purdue dominated this game for 35 minutes. Illinois made it close, but they got off to a really fast start. And they keep doing what Purdue does, which is just score the basketball. It's been incredibly impressive what they've done this year. Illinois, obviously, they're still trying to figure out their way after the Terrence Shannon suspension that will likely last the rest of this season. But there's a reason Purdue's the number 1 team in the country. They were phenomenal in this game, as they have been all year, and they got it down coming down the stretch by making free throws. So this is a good team. And in Illinois, I will say, they did not play a bad game. Domask had 26 points. Good had 16. Hawkins with 11. This is a good, or not a bad performance by the Fighting Illini. They're just playing the number 1 team on the road, and sometimes that happens.
I think Illinois will be looking forward to the rematch in Champaign, which is late in the year. Maybe it is the second to last game for Illinois.
Yeah.
I think, obviously without Shannon, they probably can't win the conference.
No.
But they could be Purdue at home, and they can still get second and be a top 15, top 10 team in the country. But, I just think it's just a lot would have had to go right for you to win this game, and kind of a lot did go right, and you still didn't win. So, unfortunate for Illinois there. Now, Mike, that's all I have for the Big Ten. Just at 38 minutes here, so this will be really good. We'll wrap up with the pick segment here, and then we can wrap it up. So the first game was Houston and Iowa State. That'll be Tuesday on the road for the undefeated Houston Cougars. You've already said Iowa State's going to pick off the W. That is tomorrow at 7 o'clock Eastern on ESPN2. I'm just going to go with Houston. I think it's very likely that Iowa State wins, but going to be a really good game because Iowa State certainly has the capability to knock them down. The next game, also in the Big 12, Mike, on Tuesday, Texas visits Cincinnati, sort of that Northwestern Michigan State style of 2 teams going in opposite directions. I'm going to go with Cincinnati here. I think the teams keep going in the directions they're going in, and that's at 7 o'clock on the Big 12 network.
Yeah, I'm going to go with Cincinnati as well, Sean. I think the skit keeps on going for Rodney Terry's Texas team, and they're going to have to answer a lot of questions in these next couple of weeks because it's not going to get any easier for UT.
And the next game we're going to pick is also Tuesday night, 9 o'clock Eastern on Peacock. That is the number 1 Purdue Boilermakers going to Lincoln to face off against the Nebraska Cornhuskers. Nebraska 12-3 on the year, have looked very impressive at home. They came very close to winning the game last year in overtime. Did they get the job done this time?
Yeah, I mean, Sean, you really baited me with these upset picks of top 3 teams. I really, really want to pick this Nebraska team, but I think Purdue is just, they're going to be too good, and it might come down to the last minute of this game, but I think Purdue gets the job done.
Yep, I agree too. I think Nebraska's been able to kind of get to the rim at home in the games that I've watched, and there's a 7-4 reason why they won't be able to do that today. Tominaga will probably throw up a bunch of shots. Some of them will go in, but I just don't think that the Nebraska players can. They might hang for a half. They might be up 4 at halftime or something like that. But I do think Purdue will prevail. But it would send a big message not only throughout the Big Ten but all of college hoops if Nebraska does pull this off. Because Purdue, this is they have not played many true road games this year, and they did beat Maryland, but they did lose to Northwestern. And Maryland's a team that'll be at the bottom of the conference, but if they lose another road game to a team in the middle of this conference, those same questions will be asked that are asked kind of every year now about Purdue. Next game, Mike, we're going to your Big 12 and your Baylor Bears hosting BYU, 9 o'clock on Tuesday on the Big 12 network. I'm going first for this one. I think Baylor gets the job done. BYU is going to be starting their Big 12 season 0-2, unfortunately.
Yeah, in the religious game, the holy war, I think Baylor's going to get the job done here, and I think they're going to win by double digits.
All right, Mike, we'll turn the page to Wednesday, and a bunch more games here. Unfortunately, we can't pick them all, but Tuesday and Wednesday are really good college basketball days. Yeah. We're going to go to North Carolina. Raleigh, North Carolina, to be specific. The Tar Heels go on the road to face the 11-3 NC State Wolfpack. Mike, you're up first for this one. Do the 7th-ranked Tar Heels get the job done on the road?
Yeah, the Tar Heels were certainly a candidate for me for Team of the Week, in part because of their big win on the road at Clemson last week. And I think they're going to get another impressive win on the road, given they're going to have a lot of people at this game being in Raleigh. But I do think North Carolina gets the job done.
Yep. I agree also. North Carolina fans have been really, really complaining about them starting the ACC season with 3 games on the road. And it would be really, really... It would send a message if they went 3-0 in those games, which they are 2/3 of the way through. They beat Pitt, they beat Clemson, as you said. That's 8 o'clock Eastern on ESPN on Wednesday. And I think the Tar Heels get the job done as well. Next game on Wednesday is Wisconsin and Ohio State in Columbus. Ohio State coming off of a tough loss at Indiana. Wisconsin coming off of a nice win at home to Nebraska. ESPN has got this at a complete coin flip, 50.0% both ways. Ohio State has looked really good when they've not played a true road game. But other than that, at home they've looked good. Wisconsin on the road has not, they went into the McHale Center in Arizona and lost. Every team in the country would have lost that game. But they did win at the Izzone against Michigan State. So I'm going to say Wisconsin's going to pick up the road victory and put a bigger damper into Ohio State's season.
Yeah. I think I'm going to go with Ohio State, Sean. We've been picking the same for a lot of these games. So going to mix it up a little bit, but I do like Ohio State right now. This is a team that has had a pretty big turnaround from last year. Last year was a pretty ugly year. So I think they're going to get a big win at home against the Wisconsin Badgers.
And it's a big statement game for Ohio State. They can prove that if they can win it against a good team at home, that will solidify themselves in the top half of the conference, which unfortunately for them they haven't done yet. Even though they beat Alabama and they have some good non-conference wins, you got to be able to win big games on your home floor. Last game Wednesday, Mike, that we're going to pick, number 9, Oklahoma, going to Fort Worth to play TCU. The Horned Frogs come off of a really, really close call against Kansas. Can they get the job done against Oklahoma here?
Go with the Sooners in this one, and I know that might be a surprise to you, Sean, but Oklahoma has still looked really good this year. They've been battle-tested on the road. That game against North Carolina was effectively a road game, and they've got a lot of impressive games to go based off of. So I'm going to go with the Sooners in this one.
And it'll be interesting to see how TCU reacts to that Kansas loss. Will it take a lot out of them, and will they be lacking energy? I don't think the crowd will let them do that. I'm going to go with TCU, but real good opportunity for Oklahoma to pick up a nice road win here, and TCU a good opportunity to put that close call against Kansas behind them and pick up a win against a top 10 team.
Yeah.
So one more game, Mike, that we're going to pick, and that is Thursday. I am really certain that we're going to have the same pick for this game, but Michigan State goes on the road to visit Illinois. Both teams coming off of really, tough losses on the road. People seem to be writing off Michigan State. This just seems like one of those games that Izzo figures out and gets his guys ready for, and they pull off an unlikely W, or Illinois could take care of business by a lot here. Who you got?
Yeah, I think Illinois is going to take care of business, and I don't see them struggling in this game. Obviously, they're missing their leading scorer, and we keep bringing that up. But Illinois has responded really nicely to that, and I think they get a nice win at home, responding from that pretty loss.
And Michigan State had a poor defensive game against Northwestern, and Illinois is not a team that you want to play when you're kind of scrambling defensively.
No,
so
not at all.
I think the Fighting Illini grabbed the W here, and it could be pretty convincing because Illinois is a better team than Northwestern. The Michigan State didn't play too bad there, and they still lost by 13, or 14. So that's all we have for them today, Mike. Bunch of games. Obviously, we can't get to all of them, but be sure to check out all of our other stuff and then the bracketology that I just posted online. So thank you, everybody, for tuning in, and we'll see you next time. Enjoy the national championship game tonight, and have a good one.